today we have with us Pallavi Arora and Shirley Bhatnagar. Welcome to Baate. I would like to introduce Pallavi and Shirley to the audience now. Pallavi Arora is a documentary filmmaker, designer, and teacher based in New Delhi. She graduated from National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, with a specialization in film and video in 2002. She has made films for various organizations and NGOs. She runs a brand called OPA that makes playful and practical products for children and adults. She also currently runs the Little Picture Project that exposes children and young adults to the visual art with a special focus on filmmaking and photography. We also have Shirley Bhatnagar, who is an alumni of NID Ahmedabad, working primarily in ceramic based on historical research. She is known for working with social and political commentary. Shirley uses her work to comment on social and political issues built upon historical study and research. She has been working with ceramics and sculptures for several years and works with a range of facial expressions and body movements to inform the work, which infuses life into its character. Also, Pallavi and Shirley have collaborated during this pandemic and created a short film named Sindhu, a subterranean song. We are really excited to have you both here, and I won't take much of your time because there is a limit. So I'll take a leave and looking forward to an excited conversation ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Preeti.
So should I begin?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So, Pallavi, I was thinking, in context of your workshop and your filmmaking, I was just thinking like what a novel idea of, that you thought of teaching film to children through your Little Picture project. So can you just talk about like how did you get the idea? How did you start the Little Picture project and when?
Actually, so the Little Picture project started around 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, in 2015, and the idea came perhaps a long time ago, and I have found when I look back at the films I made, which were often linked to education and to children in the earlier time, and also then I went on to make products for children. At some point when I had my own, I was observing them at close quarters, and I realized that this generation particularly is viewing and absorbing a lot of media, but doesn't have the same opportunity to make it. So it was a reflection on the fact that there were a couple of factors. One was the possibility of it occurring in the first place. Technology is the advances that have happened, mobile phones, editing apps, all of that have made it just so feasible to give this opportunity to create and to use video as a form of expression to much younger people. And so that was one thinking. And the other thought was, young children are exposed to clay, exposed to paint, exposed to all of that, and that's always been the case. And I just felt like this, it could be the right time for this medium to be introduced to them. So that's where it all began from. The core of what I try and do with them is, of course, storytelling, and that's linked to my filmmaking as well, and that's one of the key aspects of what is your core idea, how do you tell your story. I find with teaching this young age group is that there's also an unlearning that needs to occur. The fact that devices are available and accessible to them from the time they're born means that everybody thinks that they can shoot, everybody thinks that they can take a good photograph. And so there's a certain process there where you're like, you have to step back a bit and pause, actually, in some respects. But the beauty, I think, the joy for me of what has happened in the last 5 years with the students I've worked with and the curriculums I've worked on is young children. The feedback loop, the way they respond to a new medium is very fresh, and I really do find that the learning goes both ways. So it feeds into what I do, otherwise as well. So that's very rewarding. Um, yeah. So one of the struggles. I mean, the other thing, the one more point I'd like to make is, apart from um, storytelling, I also like to chuck at them just the ability to play with the visuals. So, animation, split screen, special effects, just like they are at a stage when if you throw a whole gamut of things open to them, they take it in a way that is very refreshing. So
Yes.
that's quite exciting. And I have found that in the last year with the pandemic, I have taken workshops online, but it's hard to work remotely with a younger age group. Each age group has its own challenges, but uh, yeah, while it has occurred, it has been challenging, which makes me think of the subject of your workshop at the Open Elective this year, Shirley, which is pause. And the word pause strikes a chord for me because it did feel like a pause for some of us, not for all of us, but for some of us, the pandemic felt like a time to pause and reflect. So, could you tell us a little bit about that and how you decided to, your thinking behind the workshop, basically? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's true that the pandemic, like literally, made us stop in our heels. We couldn't go out, travel plans cancelled, exhibitions cancelled, people had projects and works cancelled. So while there was a pause in the physical world, I felt that, completely trapped in our homes, actually there wasn't a pause, because the connection to the world was through your devices, through television, through phones, through social media. And I felt that there wasn't a pause there, like the entire world in disarray. Like the moment you opened your devices, it's just like screaming it with information. And when the call for open elective came, I thought that I could really look at the idea of like stopping, like, like the world has stopped. We need to stop. Like, don't look at your phones. And how do you do that? Like, so in my own work, I kind of like, work a lot with humor, work with the social and political commentary. And that is also coming from a space of humor. Like when your hands are tied, when everything is going wrong, you can't do anything. What is your recourse? Your recourse is humor. You have to make fun. So I thought that perhaps the workshop that I could offer to students could be, that could be like a starting point, that you look at the world through the lens of humor. And the other thing is, you look at the world also because I'm into like historical research, also through historical research, which brings me back to the fact that we collaborated on this wonderful project which came last year in a way out of the blue through the Serendipity Arts Foundation,
Yeah.
and through curator Christine Michael, who also happens to be a alumnus of NID. And Christine kind of, in her curatorial brief, like how she mentioned about kintsugi. And for some people who may not know what kintsugi is basically like a ancient Japanese technique of mending broken ceramics. And you mend ceramics with lacquer and then you finish it with a line of gold, thereby making it more precious and elevating the product. So, Pallavi, you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, the brief was while Kintsugi was the core of the brief, and we had to respond to that. Creation, recreation was also the broader thinking there with Christine's brief. But yeah, the notion of Kintsugi, coming at it from where I was, not as a ceramics person, it immediately resonated and appealed. The idea that basically something broken can be mended and made whole again. So that is for me very beautiful and symbolic, and I instinctively felt like there was something that we could take off on, both filmically and using the medium of ceramics. So the subject that was brought onto the table for what we decided to work on was what Shirley brought on. So if you could just share with everyone a little bit about the Indus Valley pottery and how we came to that.
Okay. So yes, so I mean, when the curatorial brief is talking about kintsugi, loss and healing, at that time I was researching, I was just looking online, which I guess all of us do. I was basically looking at images and I came across websites with Indus Valley pottery. And it was a shock to see these images, despite having like whatever 20 years of professional expertise and knowledge of ceramics. I felt I'd never seen these images before. I felt that I'd never seen those photographs, and I was seeing them for the first time ever. And when you delve deeper, you realize that all these images were actually mostly were not on museum sites, which means that they really had no provenance. They were on auction sites. They were on galleries, and they were mostly between Europe and America. And it's through the galleries, through the images which were posted on galleries, giving you where the pot was from, which excavation site, which year. It's like you kind of felt like a pang, like, hey, like, look at those images, and we haven't seen them. People in India haven't seen these images. There's no book on it, there's no proper documentation. And so I threw this idea at you that, like, can we look at the idea of loss through not like not like a broken pot, but like more like metaphorically.
Yeah, so for me also, when we started looking at these images and we saw all of this, and we realized that, for me again, as Shirley put it, what struck a chord was that we have never seen these objects physically as a people, as a nation. So I just felt like, we identify ourselves with what comes before us, and we have a sense of pride and ownership about who we are as people because of our history. And here was a bit of our history that we'd actually never seen. So it's a part that tells you about a time and a life of people who came before you, who lived on the land that you lived in. But at this current point, there's nothing for us, or we just don't even know it. So I mean, it's a bit like our sense of pride because the Taj is in India, and we connect to that, as an object that is part of our collective history. And here, this beautiful, very rich, depiction of life, depiction of a time, gorgeous work is basically not even been seen. So
yeah. So like you mentioned about the Taj Mahal, that's like a cultural symbol. It's, woven into our stories, our, fiction, non-fiction. And, like I read somewhere that the British actually thought that they could dismantle the Taj and take it with them, perhaps to the British Museum. But they realized that if they were going to dismantle it stone by stone, panel by panel, they would destroy it. So it ended up staying in India. So like you really wonder of the artifacts that once they leave the country they were made in, like what is your connect? Like you have no connect. So
so I mean, also I think that became like the takeoff point for us in terms of how we structured it and how it kind of all came together, where essentially the feeling of loss of these objects and the stories that they tell you from our physical environments and from our lives became the center point. And we kind of built around that and connected that to Kintsugi and the concept of...
And so Pallavi, yes, so Pallavi, you looked at the line, like that became like a visual metaphor for you.
Yeah, so initially when I looked at the brief itself, and Kintsugi actually, when just the notion of Kintsugi, the first thing I thought visually was a line, because of the line of gold. It's gold that heals the pot and that joins the pot together, liquid gold. So that line in my mind stayed, and it grew as the story grew. And when we started talking about the Indus Valley civilization, for me, that line immediately became the line of the river Indus. And so for me, the metaphor of the line, which I have used through the film in the form of animation, across the entire film, is various lines animating, whether it's the river Indus or whether it's the line of Kintsugi. Yeah. So the line will become a very important motif for us in this particular work.
Yeah, it's like it's something that connects and runs through, like a thread through the film.
It's a thread through the film. Also, we then had such a wide array of motifs and rich motifs to choose from, and we kind of decided to narrow down on some, which surely if you could just talk about, the animal motifs which we did finally decide to work with.
Yeah. So, I mean, when one was looking and had collected like maybe 50, 60, 70 images of Indus Valley pottery, and there's so many styles, there are patterns, there are different shapes, different forms. So the one thing we decided to put our hook on was animal motifs. And while they're very simplistically drawn, and many of them also quite abstract, uh, basically, what one realizes was that they may look very simple and cute from today's contemporary culture, but actually, animals in the ancient world were associated with magic and power. Like people attributed magic and power to, to animals and the wild world around them, and so the more elaborate pottery from Indus Valley with animal motifs like the ibex, the fish, the humped bull zebu that we decided to work with, they were actually not for everyday use, because the everyday use Indus Valley pottery has actually not really survived. It's in shards. It's in museums, put together by archaeologists and historians as shards. But it's the pottery with animal motifs that survives. And the reason that it survives is that it's buried. It was buried along with the dead. The moment it was made, it was buried with the dead to serve that person in the afterlife. So the importance people gave to these motifs and the painting, it seemed it seemed correct to start. It seemed correct to, use that as a starting point, I guess, for us.
Yeah, and it also helped to tie it in, to focus on one element. It was otherwise a vast array, in that sense. So it
Yes.
was a nice connecting thread. From there, uh, there was a structure for
Should
the
we
film.
talk about the, sorry, should we
Yeah.
also touch upon the music aspect of it?
Should we talk about the structure and move to the music and it coming in at the end?
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
was just thinking the way that the structure formed very briefly was in kind of three parts, where initially it was the idea of creation, very simply, and I visualized it as depicting the life of the time, joyful, a representation of basically life, if you like. So creation and
Yes.
life. This and through we were doing that through these motifs on ceramic pots, and there's animation in the background for whoever can get to see the film. We went on to the second section, which is symbolic of loss, the larger loss that we've spoken about during this conversation, and in specific terms, destruction and actually the breaking of a pot. So we look then at cracks forming and shards, and then slowly we look at the third part is a recreation and a rebuilding. So how does it all come together? How does that rebuilding occur slowly? And we looked at doing that through the building of one pot with motifs from a number of various different pots to symbolize that you can be whole again, basically. So it was one larger pot. So yeah, that was broadly how the flow of the film went, and how we decided on the storyline and the structure of it. Working during the pandemic was quite had its own difficulties, and so I mean that goes without
Shall
saying.
we bring more how we would do it?
Yeah, we the variables were so many. We had constraints. We worked in one room. We shot over a period of time. Yeah, it was very different from how it would have normally occurred. But saying that, it was a it worked, and it was a collaboration where we kept the channels of dialogue open constantly over many cups of tea, and so I think it proved to form something that worked at the end. And yeah, the music, if I can, was done beautifully, scored beautifully by Sandeep Pillai, who's also an alumni from NID, and who was due to take this workshop with me, which unfortunately he was unable to. But yeah, we had some music in our heads, and then towards the end, this, I feel, completely fortunate pairing occurred where we approached him to respond to the film, and he did so, and I feel like it's taken the film, and I mean basically the way that it's kind of integrated into the visuals and taken it to a space where I wanted it to go, and I think we both wanted it to go. So yeah.
Yeah. So it was interesting that how Sandeep was also working from a, like a
Remote.
very quiet place. He
Yeah.
said that he, to make music for a movie about ceramics, he procured like ghatams and
Yeah, a lot
made tara. So a lot of like small details went in which we were not totally privy to, but it was interesting to see another sort of process.
And also, just
So
to point out, like again, this was all with Sandeep. It was all remote. He was sitting in Kurg, and like we just and I worked with an editor as well. That was also remote. So we're all just kind of, once the shoot was over, it was a very surreal experience getting it done. Also, that was another aspect of it. It was not how it would normally have been. But yeah.
So I guess we can talk about like, should we talk about like collaboration? Like, what does it mean to collaborate today?
Yeah, sure. Where do we begin? Yeah, I mean, if I was to reflect just on this collaboration, I would just again say that while I know that we have many years of experience. We've known each other for many years, but we've never worked with each other, and so it's always a first. And the space that is, while it's the most obvious thing, but I think that's what's required, the space for each person to be able to constantly share, thrash out, be able to put their ideas forward. It does help. I do think also that you're coming in from ceramics and I'm coming in from video in this particular collaboration, because there was the letting go of, when you were making decisions on certain things to do with the material. I didn't have any. I just, you know what I mean, in that sense.
Yeah.
Similarly, I know you did the same with me when I, was animating. So there was that space given, which I think allowed this collaboration to flourish and to work, as far as I'm personally concerned, as well as, again, as I mentioned earlier, the channels of communication, constant dialogue. Don't hold back. Just say what you want, and sort it out so that the other person understands what idea you're trying to put forward and works it into their scheme of things.
It's exactly, because often sometimes when there are two creative people involved, they have their own ideas, and sometimes they can completely go in opposite directions. So I think, yes, I think like for me, the biggest learning from this particular project and also through the pandemic is that like how one worked with limited resources and yet managed to churn out something which was in a way an exploration for us. But thanks to the expertise and the years of whatever being in one field, you could come up with something which made sense to me and to you.
Right.
And so so like as a younger person, if you're collaborating, I wonder, like like we have we come from, sometimes we can come from a place of insecurity, and that luckily goes away. The more you work, it luckily goes away, and with time one can be really open and come up with things which you cannot do on your own.
Right. I think it's also your own voice becomes clearer and stronger, and you're able to also give the space to somebody else, so you see the value in that, in what they bring to the table, and just a thought, we were talking also earlier, I remember, about the very different nature of these two mediums. So and I was talking to my students at this elective about the fact that film is a highly collaborative medium, where yes, you could be the person doing it all, but in an ordinary normal scheme of things, you'll have an editor, you'll have a cinematographer, everyone has to work together, and that relationship is key. And you were talking about ceramics, And
Yeah, where you work completely independently alone in your studio. Otherwise, you cannot work.
right.
That's why the workshop was. I told people switch off your phones. You
Mhm.
cannot work with clay if you are solitary. So that's an interesting,
Yeah.
I don't know,
And
opposites.
also easier, I mean, again, connecting to the pandemic, easier for this medium, I guess, to work virtually. Like, and I'm just, again, I just wanted to reference the workshop going on right now, because it does take a lot to work in these circumstances. So that some of the students, you know, they're all the different working environments, the setups they've had to do, not easy, you know. So just, it's great that that can happen, and it is happening. But the visual medium allows that you can work this way, you know, remotely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so exactly. So even for me in the workshop, I managed to, I do dabble in like, short movements or animation, but it's thanks to our collaboration and the film that we made that, I was able to, the workshop students ended up creating like very short animations in clay.
Right.
And this again comes out of a collaborative dialogue or conversation
Yeah.
with which you take or keep with you as an experience, and it goes further and it grows.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So a
yeah,
lot has happened thanks to our collaboration, and we're also super happy to be here at this open elective this year and talking to everyone here at Bate. Yeah. So yeah. So
yeah,
we.
so I would like to end at the note that yes, times are really difficult, but despite that, it would be great if students could find a way to work with each other. Despite that,
Yeah, and I would just say, yeah, keep similarly keep the dialogue going, keep channels of communication open between you. Uh, if you think of something, you can. I mean, my animation students, everyone who's been introduced to stop motion now or anything, it can all happen also in your home environments. Like
yes,
you've seen it happening. So it's amazing what can be created with limited resources. So that's the positive takeaway of trying to handle what we're all dealing with right now, basically. Yeah. So, okay.
okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.